Wah, 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 wah. What's up, everybody? Joey G, every girl's wet dream. What's going on? Right back to where I left off, Joey G's Fab 5, and I let off at Ric Flair. That's right. The Nature Boy, my third of all time, and my third of all time. Just a man, as I left off, he was in WWF, 99, and half of 91, all 92, and for like a month in 93. As I was saying the last time, he had to leave. He had to go back to WCW. There was nowhere left on the WWE roster for Ric Flair. And Ric Flair is the man. He can just, his presence is number one. He could never be number two. So, like, where was he going to go left in WWF in 1993? I mean, you had Luger coming in, and that's the thing on Rick, of his contract, part of him and Lex Luger. Lex Luger was in the WBF, the World Body Building Federation, with Ica Pro that, tasted like shit. Bret Hart literally had to give it to his neighbors, and they would give it back to him because it tasted so much shit, just for, a little inside thing. Ica Pro, the shits, as Bret says. Lex Luger still had a WCW contract, but Ric Flair wanted to go back to WCW in Atlanta. Now, now it was full WCW. It wasn't NWA, WCW. It was WCW by this time, by January of 93. And Luger, Vince, had signed Luger to WBF, but he still had contract time left on his WCW contract. But Vince says, we'll give you Flair back. Let us debut Luger, because you remember Luger was doing the WBF. He wasn't wrestling. He was, doing the WBF. And I have a Timeline 1993 DVD that I'm going to review, and it's the shit. I mean, good shit on Lex Luger about that whole thing. But this is about Ric Flair I'm talking now. And what they did was they unveiled Luger as the Narcissist, Royal Rumble 93. They had Flair in that Royal Rumble, which was not half as good as the one as the year before. This is the one Yokozuna won, 93 in Sacramento. And Flair went out, Perfect threw him out. I mean, he was in there for about 30 minutes, you know what I mean? Not as long as he was the year before. Got thrown out next night on Raw, had the loser leaves town match. Perfect beat him. And that wasn't his last time in a WWE ring. He still had to honor his house shows. His last WWE, WWF back then match was February 10th, 1993. He fought Bret Hart on the house show for the title. But, it was a house show. He honored it February 10th, he left. And then he was at Super Brawl February 23rd. 13 days later, he was at Super Brawl. He came out of the limo. Missy Hyatt was trying to get an interview with him. He was back in WCW. And Ole Anderson goes up to him and says, since you lost to Hennig on national TV, what the F kind of value are you to me? And that's when Ric Flair said, me and Ole used to be like this, just like me and Arn. And he said, but that's when me and Ole just had a falling out. Just, after he said that to me, and Rick said, don't, mess this up. I just came back from New York where they do things right. You know what I mean? You got this little rinky-dink company. At that time, WCW, at that time in 93 was and I always liked both companies. If WWF was doing something corny, I'd watch WCW, but I'd watch WCW anyway because I liked wrestling. I was a fan, you know what I mean? I watched Smoky Mountain, you know what I mean? I watched the AWA when it was on ESPN, and they were pretty hard matches to watch sometimes without falling asleep, unless you were watching the Rockers back in the day. But Rick, came back to WCW, and right away, they had the two belts in WCW, and I mean, it was getting so bad, WCW. I mean, at that time, it was. I mean, Vader, much respect to Vader or Leon, but I mean, it was really. I mean, besides Sting, they didn't have nobody at that time in '93. Nobody. I mean, they just Sting and Sid was returning. Davey Boy was there because he failed the drug test on the steroids in WWE. But Rick coming back there, like he said, I'm the biggest thing you got now. You know what I mean? Don't mess it up, Ole. Don't, because Rick said I would have walked right back out the door and called Vince back up and went back and came up with a decision somehow to get back with WWF. So, Rick ended up coming back and, things were great. You know what I mean? And they were shuffling around who to get, and Ric Flair saw, hey, Eric Bischoff, and him, Jesse Ventura, a lot of guys pulled for Bischoff, pulled for him, and just, back then, Bischoff was a cocky little prick. I'm an Eric Bischoff guy, too, as a Vince Russo guy. I mean, I'm a Paul Heyman guy. I like Jim Cornette, too. I don't agree with all of his values and everything, but I like Jim Cornette. He's got a great mind for the wrestling. He stuck a lot back in the day, but I like Jimmy Cornette. Anyway, Flair got back to WCW and was doing good, ended up becoming the NWA champion. Had that great. 93 was awful. I had the flair for the gold. If you remember, he'd get right back in the ring right away. He did the flair for the gold, the segment. I remember the Hollywood Blondes, one of my favorite segments on a flair for the gold. They had Austin and Brian Pillman on there, and I called it the flair for the old. And they were like ripping on Flair, you know. And I think that's my favorite Steve Austin, Hollywood Blonde. I'm a big Brian Pillman fan. That's one of them, you know. But my favorite Steve Austin is the Hollywood Blonde Steve Austin. I mean, I love Stone Cold, like I said before, but Hollywood Blonde Steve Austin, great Steve Austin. And Steve Austin when he was with Lady Blossom back in the day in USWA in Memphis. Great Steve Austin. You know, I just keep bringing up Steve Austin. But, okay, back to the Nature Boy. And then, you know, he was getting kind of old, and then finally got Bischoff the job. And then, you know, Bischoff said, you know Hulk Hogan. Yeah, I know him well, Rick said. Went down, got Hogan. Flair called Hogan, said, I don't know what to sell you this, blah, 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 brought them in. Flair was trying to bring them in to make the product better. Was big getting Randy Savage in there. You know what I mean? Got them all in there. It was big getting it was big getting Bobby Heenan in there. I mean, Bobby Heenan was pretty much guaranteed a job, but Flair was very vocal. Bring him in here. Bobby will bring something good to this product. And then Flair had that great match. Well, it was an all right match at Starrcade 93. You know, his career was on the line in Charlotte, and he won the title. And then, you know, he had a rebirth with Steamboat in 94. They had them matches at Spring Stampede. They had a couple good matches. The one Spring Stampede in Chicago at the Allstate Arena. And they tore it up, you know, Steamboat and Flair. They were, you know, Steamboat was the end of his career. You know, Flair wasn't. Well, he was, but he wasn't. And they still tore it down. And you could see the heel turn in Flair. Then Hogan came, and it worked out great. They had that Bash at the Beach 94, and I was still WWF. But, you know, I didn't like Hogan by then. I was like, he's old, he sucks. They're bringing him back in WCW. And they were making it, I remember, 94, acting like it was the first time Hogan and Flair ever fought. I remember them two in the middle of the ring, July of 94. Them two in the middle of the ring, and Hogan looking at him and Flair. And Tony Schiavone and Heenan are on the stick, especially Heenan. He should have known better. I mean, perception's reality. I mean, we're not dumb. That's not one thing. When the wrestling announcer was like a dickhead, excuse my language, like a douche like Tony Schiavone, who he's an alright, he was an alright announcer back in the day, but like insulting our intelligence. I mean, just to get off topic, like, he would like we never saw Flair and Hogan. Like, I'm thinking to myself watching this pay-per-view, I saw this at a house show in December of 91 at the Spectrum in Philly. You know what I'm saying? I saw this at a house show in January of 90 or January of 92 at the Garden, in Madison Square Garden. You know what I mean? Like, and Schiavone's acting like, this is the first time Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, you know, wrestling's cool again. That was the only cool match on that friggin' card. Seriously. Because that year, you look at the two big summer shows. You look at Bash at the Beach, 94, and look at SummerSlam, 94. Bret and Owen in the cage. Undertaker versus Undertaker. Diesel versus Razor. With Walter Payton in Scott's corner. You know, Razor Ramon's corner. SummerSlam, that was their big show, WWF and WCW. So the only good match in that WCW show was Hogan against Flair. But I'm thinking to myself, like I said, I saw this Hogan and Flair thing. And Schiavone would always do that. I can remember back in the day when Barry Windham, like I said in the other shows, and Arn and Tully jumped, and they were in WWF, and Schiavone was doing this on the stick on WWF, and he was doing the play-by-play, acting like we never saw Barry, that he never called a Barry Windham match before, or that he never called an Arn and Tully match before. Like, that insults my friggin' intelligence, dude. I'm a wrestling buff, okay? I hate that. I mean, perception is reality. Like, I'm getting off topic. This is about my Fab Five, but Roman Reigns is Vince's chosen one. I say it, and I'm going to keep saying it and saying it. Just how Roman says, I'm not a good guy. I'm not a bad guy. I'm the guy. I'm going to keep saying that. Vince, perception is reality. Let everyone know Roman is your chosen one. Now you're getting off my topic of the Fab Five. Okay, back to it. Rick, you know, ended up then really his time in WCW. You all know. I mean, you guys all know the story. You know, his heat with Eric Bischoff, it got bad, and, you know, really bad to where Ric Flair, you know, took off time. You know, they wanted him to come in to do some second show on Thunder, and he was on a wrestling tournament with his, you know, son that died, Reed. And, you know, Rick was the man. And like Bischoff said in a meeting one time, the only people here that only made money for me is Hogan, Hogan, Savage, and Piper. The rest of you, I mean, and say that with Ric Flair sitting there. Like, you douchebag, Eric. Like, Hogan, Savage, and Piper, like at that time, and Bischoff made that remark, and that was like late 97, early 98, he made that remark. Hogan, Savage, and Piper, at that time, they were getting old. They were dinosaurs by then. The only one that could still go was Savage. Hogan couldn't barely go. Piper had that, you know, hip. Rick could still go. Rick was doing matches at TNA. Rick was doing great matches in TNA a couple years ago. You know what I mean? Rick could still bounce around and do that same thing as he goes off the rope, and like the King, and everybody always says, every announcer almost says it, Rick, it never works. But Rick can work. Rick can make guys. You know what I mean? Rick's promos are priceless. You go on YouTube and you look at his promos, and I'm talking not his promos in the 90s, and on Nitro during the. I'm talking about his promos back in 85, 84, when he's going on the Nature Boy, Tony Atlas. You know how he goes off. You know what I mean? Dusty Rhodes, the Common Man. Like Rick would just woo. I mean, ask some of my old homies. They know how I used to do the Ric Flair stick. But Rick is just one that. I mean, he's not my all-time favorite, but he is number 3, and just, of course, a two-time Hall of Famer, you know what I mean? As a Horseman, he went in, and, he went in as Ric Flair. I'm an Arn Anderson buff, too. I like Double A. You know what I mean? I think Double A is a great wrestler. I mean, Triple H uses Spine Buster. I mean, you can see a lot of Triple H's repertoire, and I dedicate this whole friggin' show to Ric Flair and all other stuff. So you have to get my next 2 on my final show. But Ric Flair is a guy that just loves the business. He's like me. He just loves it and would go and go. I mean, Flair's 60. I mean, what? Hogan was 62 now. Flair's 2 years older than Hogan. Flair's like 64, 65. Yeah, Flair's 65. And he just loves the business. There's nothing wrong with loving the business. You know what I mean? I'm 39. You know what I mean? Just turned 39. And I'm going to get into the business, writing, doing storylines. If I'm on TV, I'm on TV. No, I really don't. I just want to be back in a room writing the storylines and give me my paycheck. You know what I'm saying? That's all I want. I want the money. Let me get the money. You want me to go out and make the crowd hate me? I can do that. I could do that easily. I can make the whole I can make that whole AT&T Stadium in Dallas hate me. And I could have stole the show by myself at WrestleMania 32. And they would have been talking about Joey G. Okay? Because WrestleMania this year, as we all know, yes, it was one of the worst. It was the shit. I'm going to keep saying Brett's word. But yeah, Ric Flair, definitely one of the all-time greats. My 3rd favorite of all time. Bischoff did treat him like shit. Rick just, the man. Now he's managing Charlotte, and I like it. I like keeping Rick in. He's in the entity. It's going to be great at Payback next week. Brett in Natalia's corner, Rick in his daughter's corner. I mean, and Charlotte has brought back the women's division. I mean, she's actually made the women's division great. They stole the show at WrestleMania 32. Charlotte, Becky Lynch, and Sasha Banks stole the show at WrestleMania. That was the best match on the card. Best at all. One thing also I want to bring up. Scott Hall. I was watching a Scott Hall interview. Scott Hall said that next to Cena, Roman Reigns has got the number 2 merchandise in the WWE. That's interesting to me. Because the guy gets booed so much. That's just that, I think about these things. That Roman Reigns has got is the second, he gets as much merchandise as Cena. I mean, I don't see it. I mean, I see people wearing Cena shirts all the time. I don't see the Roman Reigns thing. I don't understand it. I just don't. I don't understand it. Vince, perception is reality. Change it, man. Change it quick. But, as you know, my number 2 favorite is Macho Man Randy Savage. Oh, yeah, the Macho Man. I'm going to talk about his career, how he started out. He was a baseball player for the St. Louis Cardinals. How he wrestled his great matches in Mid-South, him and Jerry Lawler. I mean, like they said on that Billionaire Ted skit back in the day, what are you talking about, brother? I didn't start in the 80s. I started in the 70s. He did. But Macho Man was great. Macho Man was the man. And rest in peace, Macho. And my next show is all going to be about the Macho Man and my number 1. And I will get them in on the next show. But Macho Man, we hear a lot about him. From the Macho Man to when he got Elizabeth, to when he got Sherry, to when he became the Macho King, back to the Macho Man again, to the Macho Man in WCW. Always loved the Macho Man. Next show will be about him and the number 1. Well, the number 1's kind of 2 guys, and you guys can take it. And the 2 hate each other. But they're my number 1 in 1. You put them together, you create the perfect wrestler. This is Joey G. Sorry I went off on Ric Flair and other things. That's just me. I just sometimes go off. You know what I mean? It's Joey G. I'm out. Get you on my final 2 on my next show. I'm out. Peace.